Welcome to Pit Lane Parlay. My name is host Mike Jokum. Jess and Matt are back joining me again, and with us for part of the episode is Chip Ganassi President Mike Hull. Guys, how are you? And Mike, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's okay. I'm not the president of Chip Ganassi Racing. I'm called a managing director, but that's okay. In fact, I'd rather not be the president of anything right now, so I'm good.
Yeah, very fair point there. Yeah, thank you again for joining us. It's a true honor to have you on the show in episode what is this, 25 or so. So to start, congratulations on Detroit and really probably your best weekend of the season. How did you guys feel leaving Detroit?
I think it was a good weekend for both Ed and Scott as a tandem. First of all, great result for both of them, either where they finished or on average for where they finished both days. That part was good. To answer your question about leaving, you always want to leave with the idea that you could do better, but I thought we did well. Considering the circumstances, considering everything that goes on with a doubleheader, getting everything right over 2 days, and we thought the track was actually very different from day to day, at least for us.
Sure.
And we coped with that, I think, and team did a great job there.
Hey, before I turn it over to Jess and Matt, obviously, everybody saw the craziness with the pace car on Sunday. How did that throw a wrench into any strategies? Did you guys were you concerned with potential debris on the track, and did that 30 or 40 minute delay, whatever it wound up being, change how you were feeling at the eventual start of the race on Sunday?
No, just wanting to know probably before the restart, and they assured us that the race was going to go full distance, full length, which was good. Those things happen. It could be a red flag for a different reason than what happened at Detroit on Sunday. I think the teams are able to adapt quickly to what goes on and off the racetrack, and it's unfortunate that it happened. But you know what? They had a spare pace car, and we went racing.
Yeah, thank God for that one. Jess or Matt, I'll turn it over to either of you guys next.
Oh, we got to start with Jess.
All right, Jess.
Okay. All right, so I have one random question that I ask everyone who joins us because it's just it started a trend, we'll say, and so I like to get everybody's answer. So if I gave you a 400-pound block of mozzarella cheese, what would you do with it?
Have a party.
All right.
Have a cheese party.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure. We'd get John Wheeler, our chef, our hospitality chef, to create something because he's really good at that. And, I bet we'd have some fun with that.
I like it. I think I'm going to have to wear my cheese party shirt to the track next time I'm in person.
I've never been asked, Jess. I've never been asked that question.
Oh, just you wait. I bet I have some more.
Mike, it's funny. The first time Jess asked that question was when we had Joseph Newgarden on. It was our 5th or 6th episode, and we were running out of questions because we were told 15 or 20 minutes, and Joseph, being the nice guy he is, we were about minute 40, and I remember Jess asking that question and going, "Oh man, she really just asked that." But now there's a T-shirt made out of it, and I have a few sitting behind me here somewhere. But anyway, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Yeah, Mike, it's thanks for joining us. It's an honor to have you on. From your point of view, it must be comforting to know that you'll forever be linked to Scott Dixon and his legacy that he's left on the sport. And I know you've stated as such that he is going to go down as one of the legends of the sport, but to me, especially with this last win, now he's tied with Michael Andretti. Would you, where would you rank Scott Dixon amongst, the top, because in my opinion, he's the top 5 greatest drivers of all time. Where would you rank him in that top 5 with, the Foyts, Andretti's, Mearses?
Yeah, I think he's done it now over more than one decade, and I think I think that's how you have to compare, Matt. I think that's how you have to compare IndyCar drivers, the longevity, what they did over time, and the people they raced against. Mario and AJ raced against each other, literally elbow to elbow for a long, long time, and they each won their fair share. I think if you look at Scott and you see that he raced against Dario and Dan, Hunter Ray presently, Will Power. You look at people that also will go down in the history of IndyCar racing as being very specially talented people. And I don't want to leave anybody out because I don't have a list in front of me. But I think that question is an interesting question because I think you have to rank or rate drivers based on the decades when they raced and who they raced against, and see what's happened. Chip Ganassi Racing has now won with Scott's win at Detroit. I didn't realize this, to be honest about it. I never do. Kelby Krause fills us in on the stats when things happen. We won 100. I think he said 103 or 104. I think it was 104 IndyCar races. If you think about that, Scott won one race before he came to us. So he's won 41 races with us, 41 out of 104. And the other races, those 60-plus races at Chip Ganassi Racing, were won by very, very talented race drivers. Vassar, Zanardi, Montoya, Franchetti, Weldon, John Carroll, and Jeff Ward won a race for us at Texas. So when you look at the race drivers that have raced at Chip Ganassi Racing, Scott's won almost half of them. I think that's pretty extraordinary. To answer your question, where would I rate him? I'd rate him number one in terms of the 2 decades where he's raced IndyCars.
Yeah, not to take anything away from Foyt or Mario or anything like that, but you can see how competitive IndyCar's been in the last, let's say, 12 to 15 years. There was a period there, maybe 05 to 2008 or so, where it was Penske versus Ganassi just about every year. But the last 6 to 7 years, it's pretty much anybody's guess when you show up to a weekend. So to see what Dixon has done, I'm always floored, and I go to bat for him on Twitter all the time, saying, this guy is a legend. You guys should pay attention as we speak. So it's really cool to hear your insight about that.
Yeah, and I think what's different, Matt, today is that we have 250 channels on television. We do have social media. People's attention spans are a lot shorter. They're 5 or 6 words now, with maybe a comma at the end instead of a period. I think if Dixon would have been racing when Mario and Foyt were racing, Rick Mears and other great IndyCar drivers, he would hold his own with those drivers because he's so versatile at what he does. He's able to adapt himself to changing conditions on the racetrack. And that's what those drivers did. If you study the history of those drivers, they constantly changed their drive style to match the what was going on the racetrack. That's what Scott Dixon does. And so by comparison, I'd say he's equal to those drivers.
Absolutely.
I've told this story before. It's worth repeating with the question. I was at dinner. I was waiting for dinner a couple of years ago now in downtown Indianapolis. It was during May, and we were having a dinner with somebody down there. It was at Ruth Chris. And I went in there, and I was early because I didn't want to be late. And Mario was in there, and he was sitting at the bar, so I sat with him, had a drink with him. And he made a comment to me about Scott. He said, I'm really glad that Scott races now. And I'm really glad I didn't have to race against him. And I think that was a great compliment on behalf of Mario. And he went on and elaborated, some of the reasons why. But I think the bottom line is it was a terrific compliment and easily understood.
Absolutely. That's a
Yeah.
fantastic answer. We appreciate your insight on that. We'll turn it back over to the other Mike here.
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Matt. So, one of the things that stuck out to me in Detroit this weekend was Ed Jones being interviewed in between qualifying groups. I think it was Sunday, running down to Scott to give him some qualifying advice. How much has Ed picked up from Scott already, and what does it mean that you have teammates that seem to be really gelling together, and such a youngster in Ed Jones and the veteran in Scott Dixon?
Well, I think what happens is when you have teammates, whether it's in this case it's two for us, your teammate, what you do is you read the racetrack based on what your teammate is doing. We're wireless between the timing stands, between the 9 and the 10 stand, so we can see what's going on with the other car. We can see the amount of downforce they want to run. We can see mechanically what they're trying to achieve. We can see where they are on the tires. We can see lots of things. And so Scott's group can see what Ed is doing, and Ed's group can see what Scott's doing. By the mere fact at Detroit that they were in different qualifying sessions, and the fact that it was wet, Ed came straight forward and said, "This is what my impression of what the racetrack actually is." And he was doing some things that some people would consider to be unconventional in terms of line around certain corners. And that really helped Scott. The problem we had, I think it's with Scott at Detroit, is we were so far back in the pits based on our terrible qualifying at Indianapolis Road Track that we missed the last lap. He was up a full second with 3 corners to go over Rossi's time, and the track went red. Full second. So I think that Ed's help with that was good. Every lap was faster on the wet tires for everyone. We just spotted everybody about 3/4 of a lap there at the front end of that session, but that's the way racing works. We still qualified well, and we raced well.
Sure. Yeah. Great answer. Thank you very much. Jess, we'll let you take it off topic again.
Okay, so again, off of racing entirely. One more that I like to ask everybody because it gives a good insight to you as a person. If you had a spirit animal, what would it be?
If I had a what animal?
A spirit animal.
Spirit
so an
animal.
Yeah, your spirit animal.
What's a spirit animal?
So an animal that you really feel connected to for some reason.
Oh my God.
Or something that like represents you.
Yeah.
Oh no. I've never really thought about that. Maybe a Jack Russell.
Oh, good answer.
Okay.
I like it. Yeah, as you might have heard, my dog is barking somewhere downstairs in the house right now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Jack Russells are all over the place. They don't sit still very long.
There you go.
I like that.
Go ahead, Matt. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually turn to a fan question that we received on Twitter. A guy named Indy Car Theorist, his Twitter handle is IC Theorist. Since we're on the subject of Ed Jones and Scott Dixon sharing information, you guys scaled from 4 cars to 2 cars this year. Is there any hopes of running maybe a 3rd car again next year, or is it way too early to tell? Is there any insight you can give on that?
Our attitude about that, or our opinion about that, is we would like to run more than 2 cars. So maybe that's the short answer, but we want to be able to hire the drivers. So that requires sponsorship on our side, not somebody bringing the sponsorship.
Okay, so so like instead of someone coming with $3 million, you'd like to find the sponsor that fill the car? Okay, that makes sense.
Right. So to answer your question, we'd love to run more than 2 cars. Both our cars are fully funded by sponsorship that Chip Ganassi Racing has generated with partners. And we've hired the drivers to drive the cars. And we feel that's the best way to go racing.
So to kind of follow up with that, so you're actively looking for more sponsors then, per se?
Absolutely. We have a sales staff that's working constantly. And think about it like this: we race in three places. We race in IndyCar, we race in NASCAR, the Saturday and Sunday race in NASCAR, and we race in the IMSA series, and we race in the WEC series. So we race 2 sports car programs, NASCAR program Saturday, Sunday, and an IndyCar program. And we offer to partners something that a lot of race teams cannot, and that is they can go across all of those spheres of racing. They could do the Daytona 500, the Indy 500, the 12 hours of Sebring, the 24 hours of Le Mans, and we have partners that do that now. So that's the emphasis that we've placed, with our sales staff has placed, to try to find additional funding for us to be able to go racing.
Perfect. So we'll turn back to Mike.
Cool. Switching gears from the present to something that Jay Fry said after the 500. We heard a couple drivers, and team owners talk about maybe some tweaks that needed to be made to the Speedway Aero kit. And one of the things I heard mentioned was potential for just more downforce options in general. What do you think on that? Did you think the Speedway kit was okay, and it was more just the fact that it was about 150 degrees that day? And what are your thoughts on that one? And we'll take it from there.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it was hot on Race Day at Indy. There's no question about that. And I'm sure it affected the racing. But did it affect it as much as people wanted it to? I don't think so. I think the layman's difference between where we raced before, the last 2 or 3 years, where we raced at Indianapolis and where we raced this year, is the fact that the previous Aero kit punched a big hole in the air.
Makes sense.
And that allowed cars behind to stay close. It didn't necessarily help some cars to pass, but it allowed them to stay a lot closer in formation, whereas this Aero kit likes clean air. And it doesn't punch a big hole in the air. So I don't know that teams are the right people to choose the spec of the car. What teams do best is deal with the spec they're given. Did we like racing that way? Not where we were racing. And do I believe that IndyCar will do something? Yes. I would hope they do it at Pocono this year to get an idea of what it's going to be like for next year, rather than wait till Indy.
I agree.
But I'm not privy to what they're doing. I do like the fact that we have a simplified Aero kit now. It's really easy for people to understand it. I think it's really easy for the TV people not to trip over it. And I think it's easy for journalists to explain it, a print journalist, as an example, or a local reporter to explain it, much easier than it used to be. When you had a race car that had 16 versions of appendix on one corner of the car, that's very difficult for somebody to understand what that actually does, including the teams. So I think we're headed in the right direction, and I have a lot of confidence in Jay Fry and the technical group that works for IndyCar now that they have employed is probably the best group, the best group of being together, of not being individually agenda driven that they've had in a long time, and I think the teams are patient with that, and we don't make the rules, and I think everybody, you could poll 20 people and get 20 different things they probably should do, but I think IndyCar will do 2 or 3 practical things to make it better.
Yes, before I let Jess take back over there, you brought up a good point that I'm just going to segue into my question I was going to ask later on. One of the I don't know, social media hashtags that we came up with here is "In J Fry We Trust." You'll actually see Mrs. Fry and her family wearing the J Fry shirts. they were, she bought a couple, so thanks Danielle. But are you happy with the direction that Jay Fry and team has taken IndyCar? I guess the answer to that is probably yes, based on what you just said. But I'll let you elaborate for the most part.
So I'll answer it like this. Up until Jay took that job, with any of his predecessors, who all had good intention, we go now to an owners meeting. We had one at Indianapolis, and Jay lays out a plan for the next 5 years. It's very detailed. That's terrific. We've never seen that before. He does the same thing for the engine forecasting. He laid out a 10-year plan for the engines. It was funny. I was sitting in the owners' meeting next to Mr. Penske, and Jay said at some point, in 2026, we're going to do this with the engine. And Mr. Penske looked at me and said, I'm not going to be here in 2026. So, I mean, when you think about it, he's forecasting way down the road. So what that does for race teams is it creates a way to forecast what you need to do with your people, with your purchase, with your direction, with perhaps hiring future engineers, future race drivers, future employees, the whole thing. I think that's really good. The second thing that he's really pushed hard on is finding commitment from promoters for multi-year promotional contracts, sanction contracts.
Yep. With
date equity. It used to be in the IRL series that all those contracts were 1 year at a time. How can you as a racetrack owner plan to do anything when you only have a 1 year contract? Now, I don't know all the reasons for that. I have no idea. I don't know the financial implication for why they did that. But what's really good now is you show up at Long Beach and, you're going to be there for another 2 or 3 years. You show up at St. Pete, they just renewed for another 2 or 3 years. You go to Barber, same thing. So I think that's really, really important, because then you go back to your sponsor group and you say, we're going to race here, 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 and here are the dates. And, in 2020, we're going to be there. PNC Bank as an example. They want to know where we're going to be in 2020, 2021. Because
answer.
They're now pushing the retail side of their bank with our race program. So they're getting all the retail establishments amped up for IndyCar racing, and they certainly don't want us to leave an area where they have banks.
Sure.
I think Jay pushes really, really hard for continuity, and then the third thing with him, he's so practical, and he uses his ears, and he listens to what the teams are talking about. He's not afraid to listen. And he's not afraid to make directional change if it's necessary, based on consensus. And I think those three things for him are keys to the future.
I think that's the best answer we've heard so far on that one. So, Jess, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so again, not racing related. Well, I guess it could be racing related. So who around you, so family, friends, colleagues, yourself, whomever around you that who has the worst luck?
Who has the worst luck? Wow. Huh. I don't know. I could say that I've played the lottery for a long time and I haven't won, Jess. I don't know if that counts or not. And I've even played the lottery on days when we won races and it didn't matter. So maybe what I'm going to do, Jess, is I'm going to take my 400-pound block of cheese and go down to the 7-Eleven and see what happens.
That is fantastic.
Oh, I could only imagine their faces when you walk in with a 400-pound block of cheese.
Yeah.
Matt?
Okay, yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of what you had said with Mike about Jay Fry and seeing a big push for a schedule that's pretty consistent. You know, you've been around the sport for a long time. Um, is there one venue that you got that IndyCar used to go to that you wish, wow, I just really wish we went back to that venue?
Laguna Seca
Oh, yeah.
comes to mind almost immediately for me. I don't know the climate there these days in terms of them being able to promote IndyCar racing the way it once was. Because what happened at Laguna was we used to have massive crowds there. And then they started building all those big houses around the racetrack. And the people that live in those big houses, they figured it out. In California, I grew up in California. In California, there's one thing Californians don't want to do: park and ride. So what they did was the people that lived on the hillsides there put a lot of pressure on the county there, and they only allowed so many private vehicles on the grounds at Laguna Seca toward the end of our tenure in the kart days. And you know, a guy or a girl in a Ferrari or a Porsche or a high-end BMW, whatever, would rather drive their car by themselves and park it in the dirt on the side of the hill at Laguna Seca than park it in the parking lot at the Del Monte Mall in Monterey or next to the In-N-Out in Salinas. So it killed the crowd, absolutely killed the crowd. So it would be great to go back there, and I would hope they could overcome that somehow and get that crowd back that we used to have, because that was a fantastic place to race.
I think, yeah, you probably, well, given track limit rules nowadays, I don't know if we'll ever see a pass like the pass ever again. But to quickly follow up on that, not to put you on the spot, so to speak, but I think given the geographical nature of, you know, racetracks and whatnot, I think Sonoma and Laguna Seca are pretty close to each other. So if you had to pick one or the other, would you, you know, is it safe to assume you'd pick Laguna Seca, or are you happy with IndyCar going to Sonoma?
Well, what I would do is I think they're both terrific venues. First of all, Sonoma, the sponsors love Sonoma. They love Sonoma. The racing purists love Laguna Seca. So if I were the grand master of the schedule for IndyCar racing and could make a deal with both of those venues to continue, I would have one in the spring and one in the fall. Because California can easily take it. They've got a big population base. And they would be far enough apart to where they could each be promoted without hurting the other one.
That's fair. All right, perfect. We'll toss back to Mike.
Sure. So speaking of the past, you know, obviously, you know, you and Ganassi Racing have had many highlight accomplishments. Is there one, be it Indy 500, IndyCar Championship, Le Mans win, you name it, that really, you know, stands out amongst all of the others as the one single thing you are most proud of?
I think there's probably two or three rather than one, but
Sure.
I think in 1996 when we won the championship with Jimmy Vasser, actually when we won the championship with him, I think that helped to validate how hard everybody was working, but the fact that the culture we were creating was gelling and working.
Yep.
2 years prior to that, in 1994, we've been working on the culture and the defined program for a bit of time before that. When Michael Andretti turned up to drive for us, he won 2 races for us. So it proved to the people working then that they could win together. But it wasn't until 96 when we strung it all together and won a championship that really, in my opinion, became very, very important. In 2000, when we went, we'd won a lot of races between 96 and 99, 2000.
Sure.
And we'd won championships. And everybody had learned how to exhale. But when we went to the Speedway in 2000, having not really been there for quite a long time, and being there in a car that we were not used to, and winning that race, I think that helped to set us apart. And I think after that, what's happened over time is that the culture that Chip Ganassi Racing possesses is one of mentoring. So it's not the same people that won those races then that are working now. That some of the same people are still with us, but they aren't in the trenches like they were. And I think what we've done a good job of doing is that as people come through the system that we have with process, they're mentored by people that have a lot of experience, and they take it on. And the experienced people are absolutely unselfish in what they give. And I think after 2000, winning the championships was one, and then doing what we did by moving IndyCar people in 2003 onto the, at that time, Grand M program with prototype racing, with over time 3 different engine manufacturers until winning championships. I think it proves who we are. So I'm proud today of who we have working for us today, because I think they're the byproduct of who we had from 1994 on.
Sure.
So I think, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I look at it.
No, that's a great answer. Jess, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, so you are hosting a dinner party, and you get to invite 3 people, and these 3 people can be living or dead, and whoever you want. So who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to dinner? Any 3 people? Jim
Living
Clark?
or dead? Yep.
No, Jim Clark would be number 1 for me.
Okay.
And I would hope he would accept the invitation. John Kennedy.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah, that's a good
Nice.
one.
I grew up when I was young and growing up. He was the president of the United States, and I always thought he'd be a great guy just to talk to. I don't know what he would be like behind the door. He might not be that way, but I think it would be very interesting to talk to him. Mickey Mantle.
Oh, yes.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah.
So there you go.
As
like it.
As a Yankees fan, that one makes my heart happy.
I grew up as a kid watching baseball, and Mickey Mantle. I idolized Mickey Mantle when I was growing up.
Yeah, so did my dad.
Even after I read his book.
I've read a few Mickey Mantle books, and they paint a different picture a little bit, but still a fascinating player to watch some old videos of. Unfortunately, obviously, I don't think the 3 of us got to grow up and watch him, but he was definitely a hell of a ball player. Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, hopefully Dario's not listening, because I don't know if you'd make Dario's Christmas card list not inviting him to a dinner with Jim Clark. I think he would hold that against you.
Well, no, you said, she said, Jess said, who would you invite? If it's a dinner party, you're going to have a lot more people there than just
That's
those
true.
3, right?
Other people just show up. Yeah.
Yeah, if Jim Clark was there, Dario would just show up uninvited.
Absolutely.
Just bring a bottle of
Well,
wine.
it's funny because Dario and I have that in common. And when Dario came to drive for us, when I was a kid, I went to Riverside Raceway. I was not quite old enough to get in the garage area, but some friends of mine snuck me in there. And I was introduced to Jim Clark. And he was really gracious, and he spent some time. He probably spent 30 minutes with me. And we talked one-on-one. It was at the end of the first practice day there. And I took some pictures of him with my 35-millimeter camera. And when Dario came to drive for us, I sent him a picture of Clark. And he responded back by text or email, I don't recall which it was, said, "Where did you find that picture? I've seen, I think, every picture of Clark that anybody's ever taken, and I've never seen that picture." So I sent him a few more. And I said, well, yours truly took those pictures, and they've never been published.
Nice.
So, that was great. I understand completely. If you think about, we talked about great drivers. This guy won 25 out of 75 races.
Wow.
Just an incredible
25
percentage.
out of 75. 1/3 of all the Formula One races he raced in, he won.
It's crazy.
1/3. And I find it amazing that people don't.
Oh. Did we lose?
Jim Clark with the record that he had.
Yeah.
To me, it's just he was extraordinary.
Perfect. So we'll turn it back to a Twitter question here. I do want to give a shout out real quick to James Alban, who did kind of ask. His Twitter handle is the King of Swing. He did kind of ask about the Aero Kit at Indy, and so Mike touched on that earlier. Turning to a different question here, kind of peeking a little bit to this weekend. With the changes to Texas's pavement last year, we saw a different kind of racing. Tanner Miller at IndyCar fan wants to know, how do you think the racing at Texas will be this weekend?
I wish I could answer the question. I don't know. I know that Firestone's coming with a different tire for us, a bit softer on the right side. I don't know if that will help the racing or just accommodate the downforce level. The racing at Texas has always been really good because the cars slide so much that the tires degrade after maybe 10, 12 laps. And, you're 15%, 18% into the stint at that point. And you have to deal with it until you're going so slow that you have to pit because you're going to lose too much track position. So I think the race will be similar to that, to be honest about it. I think it'll be very similar to what we've seen. All of us are kind of anxious to see what that actually is going to mean for us.
Sweet. I know we're all looking forward to it. So we'll toss it back to Mike here.
Yeah. Great point on the touching back to Jim Clark. I unearthed some photos that my great grandfather took at Trenton and Langhorne Speedway back in the day of Jim Clark. So I have to get them framed and I'll post them online.
Yeah.
That was a good reminder because I know my dad has asked me a couple times if I frame them since I found them in their basement a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
In I don't know what the best way to ask the question is. What is it like working with Chip Ganassi, as a man, as a boss, and for the last nearly 26 years?
He's a one-sentence person, and frankly, people, I assume most people vocationally that are listening to this, they actually have to go to work every day. So they probably understand what that means.
Yep.
If they don't work for a person like that. What's great about it is everybody in the room knows what Chip wants us to achieve. There's nothing behind the curtain. It's not like the Wizard of Oz. He's a very competitive person. He doesn't like to lose. When mistakes were made, he would rather focus on correcting them so they don't happen again than berating who that just happened to. Can be extremely emotional at times, but because of the environment that we're in. When I first went to work for him, he was very volcanic. Ashes were going everywhere. I think these days, with the fact that he races in sports cars and in NASCAR and in IndyCar, he has seen lots of things happen to his teams and his people and his drivers that are good and they aren't good. And he's more measured with temperament than when I first went to work for him. I worked for him, in fact, I made a deal with him to go to work for him just a year ago now. 26 years ago now. So it was in June. So it's been a great ride. He's a great person to work for. And he finds ways to win. And he finds resource. And you have to have that in an owner if you want to win races.
Sure. Piggybacking off that, what is one thing about Chip Ganassi that the public doesn't know? Does he have any hidden talents, or can he play the banjo, or I don't know, making up things here? Is there one thing that people don't know about Chip Ganassi?
Wow. I would say he's a normal person.
Fair enough.
I don't know what people think from a distance, but what's great about him is he doesn't have outside interest. He doesn't have businesses other than the racing business. He concentrates 100% all the time thinking about his race teams. And I don't know what people think about that. They think, he must have 10 hobbies. He must have, exotic cars. He must, travel the world. He must do this, that, and the other thing. No. All he does is work in racing, just like we do. So that's what's in common with everybody under the roof at Chip Ganassi Racing with the owner.
I love it. Jess, I'll turn it over to you, and we'll each end with one more question here, and let Mike enjoy an evening before he has to head to Detroit soon. Texas. Sorry, yeah. Detroit was last weekend. Can you tell it's been a long day?
Okay, so kind of on that, I guess we'll go with it's been a long couple of days. So the old adage is you learn something new every day, right? So what is something new that you have learned in the past week?
Oh, what is something new I've learned in the past week? Wow. Not to field questions from Jess.
I told you I'd throw you for a loop.
Yeah, Wow, I don't even know how to answer that question, Jess. You stumped me.
All right.
You could maybe say that the new Chevrolet Corvette has great safety features.
Well, I could say that. I really felt sorry for Mark Royce, because, I read some of those articles. Man, he took it on the chin for that. And if people understood how dedicated he is to Chevrolet performance, and how dedicated he is to the race teams that are Chevrolet race teams, and how dedicated he is to the sport itself, they would probably cut him a little slack. Having seen him on the inside and understanding the person that he is, he's such a terrific person. And I'm sorry to see that he got caught out there. I don't really understand, though, why it took IndyCar. IndyCar has a spare pace car. Why it took so long to get a spare pace car ready?
We were all wondering the same thing.
Yeah, nobody said anything about that. And IndyCar had a big job there because they had 21 or 22 stalled cars and maybe 2 starters. So yeah, I don't know what to say about that either.
Yeah, it's funny, the whole pace car thing. My wife, who doesn't watch that much racing, agreed to watch the race on Sunday as part of my birthday weekend celebrations, and she went, "Does this happen a lot?" And what do they do? And I didn't have a good answer for either of those. Thankfully, Twitter has given us some past Johnny Rutherford examples and a few others that popped up. But yeah, definitely feel I read his apology, and you definitely felt the emotion when he put out that statement.
Yeah, he's such a terrific person, and I hated seeing that happen.
So, Matt, we'll turn it over to you for just one more.
Sure. Yes. So again, thanks for coming on, Mike. It's been an honor to talk to you. Um, kind of going back to
Thanks, Matt.
going back to the NJ Fry We Trust hashtag. It was announced right before Indy actually about the new engine formula coming up. I believe 2021. Is that the right date?
2021 right now is.
Yeah, and I know these two other co-hosts of mine have been bragging about methanol and whatnot, but what is your kind of take on the new engine, the increased horsepower, and the potential for methanol to come back to IndyCar?
Well, first of all, I think it's great that we're going to have an engine that's going to be over 900 horsepower. I don't know what the final number actually is, but it's funny. I interacted with a couple of people on social media about that PNC show car that we have in the bank building in Indianapolis.
Yes.
And if you put that car in parallel to the current car, and you look at each of them stacked one on top of the other, they look pretty identical.
They do.
They're pretty close to each other. And if you think about that, it's hard you can't go back in time. But what's really great is we are kind of going back in time while at the same time we're moving forward here. And, we used to race with 1,000 horsepower with that body kit. And the cars were never straight. We had 2 tire companies and most of the time 3 chassis manufacturing companies. So we had some variation there. But the reality is the cars were never straight. And there was a lot of talent holding on to the steering wheel in those days. And we're, again, seeing that in IndyCar racing. The cars aren't straight now. I can't imagine what they're going to be like with 900 plus horsepower. I think it's going to be great. I can't wait. I hope I get to see it. And I think the talent pool that IndyCar is developing and the fact that there are people outside IndyCar racing, open-wheel drivers now of merit that are perhaps interested in being here by 2020 or 2021, I think it has the makings for what it should be, what it should be recognized to be. So I'm looking forward to the horsepower. In terms of the methanol question, let's face it, we went E85 or ethanol because that was environmentally driven, and they were a sponsor of the series. It's hard to say by 2021 where we're going to be with the fuel for an Indy car, what it's actually going to be. We know that it makes more horsepower than what we have, so that would be great, but I don't know. The engine companies will have to test it and tell us.
Perfect.
Great. And, like Matt said, Mike, thank you very much. For those who don't follow Mike on social media, his Twitter handle is @IndyMHull. And out of many people in the series, one of the most approachable on social media, always gives good replies and good stories. So, Mike, thank you for that. Looking back on your, beginnings as an IndyCar mechanic, back in the late 70s and early 80s, is there anything you learned back then that you've taken with you throughout your, IndyCar and open wheel journey?
I think what you take with you is you find out as you go along in life, no matter what you choose to do for a living, that it's more that there are key people in your life that make a profound difference for you. It's this Eastern philosophy of life. I don't know that we truly appreciate the Eastern philosophy enough, and that is everything happens for a reason. At the time, you don't realize it. We're all kind of rotating around each other, and we kind of come into each other's lives at the right time. And at the time that does happen, you don't often realize it. So I would say over my career in racing, I've worked for Chip for 26 years. I've worked in racing since I've raced cars since 1971. There's probably 5 or 6 people in my life that have made a difference for me. And they pointed me in a better direction and they helped me think about things in a different way. And I think most people in their lives will say the same thing. They'll look back on their lives and they'll say that. So for me, I think it's more that.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it all happened for me. The timing for me in my life has been good.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And with that, again, Mike, thank you very much. We'll be sure to send you a link to this when it's posted on Thursday.
Okay, terrific. Yeah.
And we'll let you enjoy some downtime before Texas. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll try to get to those Twitter questions that were on there.
Okay.
To talk about tonight. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Jess. Thanks for the cheese question.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. So we are approaching the 51-minute mark here, so we'll wrap things up. A quick shout out to SoundQ Audio for sponsoring another episode this week. Maybe, man, this might be my favorite episode to date. Mike Hull was a fantastic interview. And be sure to check out the show on wildfireradiosports.com, live on Fridays, 3:15 to 4:15. And I think that's all I have to blab on about. And I think let's just jump right into the pitfalls here, guys, and we'll wrap things up. I'll start it out for a change instead of putting either of you guys on the spot. I'm gonna go with the low-hanging fruit here and go with the ABC coverage. For you'd think for the last weekend of ABC coverage until at least 2022, you would have seen some montages of sorts, some acknowledgement, anything just to say, obviously, Alan Bestwick and many guys said something on Twitter afterwards, but, on TV, for those who don't check social media, they didn't say anything, almost like it, they'd be back at the beginning of next year on ABC. So it was disappointing, and obviously the, terribly timed commercial breaks are really take away from the race, especially for those who aren't, hardcore IndyCar fanatics, or maybe you're, somebody like my wife sitting next to me got wondering why they take so many commercial breaks. So definitely disappointed there. I don't know if either of you guys disagree, or I'll turn it over to Jess.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of disappointing, I guess. But at the same time, there was the delay, and who knows if maybe they had something planned that they couldn't get in, although they could have gotten it in during the delay. But, maybe they were planning for the end of the race, and it just didn't happen. But, yeah, it was a little disappointing. I mean, that's a long time, a long history, and you would think they would, at least have some sort of goodbye.
Yeah, I think... even just some sort of sign-off, and we got nothing instead. Jess or Matt, I'll turn it over to either of you guys.
Matt, you want to go?
I got it. Okay. So, yes, on social media, right after the Saturday race, everybody's favorite driver, Charlie Kimball, who had hit it was his first career race, Santino Ferrucci, who drove for Coyne, hit him in the rear in turn 7, close to the end of the race, spinning Ferrucci around pretty violently. And I think Ferrucci's car was A, lucky not to get airborne after impacting the curb at such a high rate of speed, and B, was lucky not to blindside a car who was apexing in the corner. And so did Charlie Kimball take to social media and apologize, or did he feel remorseful about it? Well, let's take a look here. Putting today in the rear view mirror, the 23 was good, great pit stops, great fuel mileage. With a rookie, I should have given more benefit of a doubt. We'll qualify better tomorrow so we don't have to fight as hard to get up front. That is the worst apology I've ever seen in my entire life. I said some not safe for work words on social media about this, but are you kidding me? All you had to do was say, sorry I hit you, won't happen again, hope we can fight clean tomorrow. Because if you watch the replay, Ferrucci did nothing wrong. He was protecting the inside line. he didn't make any sudden movements to that inside. He planted his car there and made it known that you had to go on the outside to do it. And Kimball just straight up ran right into him. And this is par for the course for Charlie Kimball's career to just completely wreck someone. I thought it was interesting to hear Mike Hall's kind of viewpoints about adding a third car, stating we don't want someone just to bring money. And I thought that was a clear and deliberate shout out to Max Chilton, Charlie Kimball, Sage Karam, Sebastian Saavedra, maybe even like
on.
Graham Rahal, other people who come to Ganassi just kind of with a paycheck. I'm so over Charlie Kimball. I think he is one of the nicest guys off the track, but just a complete tool on it. And if you can't tell, I do have a little bit of bent up frustration with Kimball. Kind of over the guy. It's been a decade, not a decade, close to a decade now of just watching him waste chances and crash people. So that's my pitfall for the week.
Yeah, I think you make a good point in that Ferrucci didn't make any sort of sudden movement inside or outside. He pretty much held his line. Is there a chance he backed off earlier than most people would have? Sure, but that gives Charlie no excuse to just plow into the back of him like that. And like you, I pretty much feel the same way, so I won't rehash that, and we'll turn it over to Jess here to finish it off.
Yeah, I feel the same way about him. So my pitfall, I kind of, again, feel like I'm going for a low-hanging fruit. However, let's be real. There was a lot this week that could have been pitfalls. So, I mean, the fruit was plentiful this week. So mine, and like Michael said earlier, I'm not going to pick on the driver of the pace car. I think he's taken more than enough heat. Let's be real. If we're really thinking about it, everybody has accidents. It happens. My problem was Chevy's response, where they blamed quite literally everything but the driver. And, he made a mistake. Just say, you know what? He made a mistake, but he's safe. Everybody's okay. And we're moving on. But instead, they blamed the weather, the track conditions. It was sunny and dry. I'm not really sure what they were trying to go for there.
Yeah, I don't even know how to reply to that.
Yeah, and a lot of people are feeling the same way Jess was. Like, what are we reading right now? Like, are you serious? Blaming the weather and the conditions on the, like, what?
I blame the sun. Wait, what? Okay.
Just say, listen, he made a mistake. It happens. Obviously, he apologized for making a mistake and didn't blame the weather or the track conditions or the leprechaun sitting in the tree above him there. But yeah, I mean, we'll just leave it at that. I mean, come on. That's going to be something that's laughed about for many years, and not the pace car accident itself, just the fact that Chevy even felt the need to comment.
Why even comment at all, other than to say everyone is safe, everyone's okay, and
the car
we have a
did
backup, and it's going to be fine.
The car's safety was excellent. They could have said that too. Like, look, hey, we just crashed at 7 miles per hour in a concrete wall, and both guys walked away.
And everything was fine.
Yeah. The $123,000 car safety features did its job, and obviously got a lot of attention. I saw Adam Stern post how much potential revenue that generated by just talking about the pace car for hours and hours. I forget what the number was or what the exact figure, exact wording Adam Stern used, but nonetheless a very strange statement by Chevy. With that, I think we can wrap things up since we're just about at the hour mark here. Jess, do you want to sign it off?
And guys, keep your lug nuts tight.